I mean, just think about it, how amazing it is that we can evolve or devolve our family line in one generation.
Experts are not more disciplined than you. They've just found more ways to win.
My advice to anyone who wants to be successful in any domain is to do things away from where you broadcast and then take it to that broadcast. I mean, take your real life to Instagram and be very cautious about taking Instagram to your real life.
Whatever that thing is that you actually enjoy doing, where you lose track of time when you're in it, even if it's challenging, but usually it is challenging, right? Like it's not easy because then it's boring, right? Yeah. Which is also why the uncertainty thing is so key, right? To not knowing if it's gonna work or not. You are gonna work though, either way. Is that the people who are, quote, addicted to work make it easy to be addicted to work because they do things worth doing. And I think a lot of it is coming down to making sure that you take the few precious seconds that we have to do the few things that are worth doing for the rest of your life.
When the school system was saying you're shit, I didn't believe them. And so I watch a lot of people being driven by hurt, and I can sense that I'm driven by love.
Even the idea that people are like, I'm afraid of failing. No one's afraid of failing. People are afraid of other people's judgment about their failure. If you could fail in private and no one would know, like when you play video games and you lose the level, you're not embarrassed.
Here's something right for everyone. Cut out 1 hour of negativity, add 1 hour of positivity. If you're listening right now and you're like, ugh, social's such a drag, it's because you're in a drag mindset and the algos and the people you follow are following you. You know what my social looks like? Fucking sunshine. I'm being dead fucking serious. You know what my algos look like? Fucking sunshine. In the world of the momentum of darkness right now, sunshine. You know why? I choose to fight for positivity, but I refuse to not be grounded in practicality, which is why I've always thrown curveballs.
When you have the friends who are telling you, must be nice, or you think you're better than us, or, so we can't drink anymore. That's when you can be like, yeah, then what? Well, then we wouldn't be friends. You're not going to be friends with them eventually anyways, I promise you. Anyone who says that to you, you're not going to be friends with. If you want to ultimately become the person you want to become, they're only going to reject you harder and harder until eventually you have nothing to share about. And the only thing that you'll talk about is the past, which, by the way, one of the great leading indicators of, at least in my opinion, of a great way to know when to cut a friend is when they only talk about your past. And so punking the game, and it's one of those really uncomfortable things the first time you do it, but then you get more and more comfortable with it because they're like, I would never live your life. And you're like, I know.
The amount of people that have money that I know that are incredibly unhappy, deeply insecure, deeply in depression is so much you couldn't even imagine. Money accelerates one's truth. If you're happy, you're happier. But if you're angry, you're more angry. Money exposes us. It doesn't change us.
When you decide to make a different choice, get ready. It's going to feel uncomfortable. There's going to be uncertainty. You're not going to be able to predict the next moment. It's going to feel unfamiliar. So if the body has been conditioned to be the mind, then the servant is the master. So the body starts sending information back to the brain to think a certain thought so that you make the same choice, that you do the same thing, you create the same experience.
Comfortable, this is familiar.
Get back to the same feeling of suffering. Oh, that feels so much better than the uncertainty of the unknown. So going from the old self to the new self and crossing that river literally is a neurological, it's a biological, it's a chemical, it's a hormonal, it's a genetic death of the old self. That's the phoenix lighting itself on fire. And most people would rather cling to that familiar place than take a chance and possibility.
I try to have as few rules as possible to give myself as much latitude to live my life.
You know, everything that works for me is when I feel like I'm doing it for someone besides myself. I'm doing it to make my parents proud. I'm doing it to show my sister the right way. I'm doing it for my employees. Even the way I got into better health and fitness was I hired a babysitter, but really what I hired was someone to do it for. Mike and Jordan is who I want to make proud today. My scale being 175 versus 176.8, which it was 2 days earlier, and Mike texting me, great job, on the travel day, I did it for him.
You can drink and do drugs and watch porn. If you still do the shit, that's all that matters. Now, those things might make it more difficult, but I always came from the perspective of like, I want to do the formula and then live my life how I want to live. And if that means that sometimes I drink more and sometimes I drink less, or sometimes I work out more and sometimes I work out less, sometimes I eat dessert, sometimes I eat really small desserts, that's fine. And so it's just like, what are the actual things that matter? And if you look at, and I know you have a lot of wealthy friends, like the way people work, the routines that they have are so varied, which to me means that they don't matter.
When your entire life is only predicated on the health and well-being of a small group of people you love more than breathing, nothing scares you.
Cold water, is a universal stimulus for creating adrenaline release. And there's a big range of cold, not infinite, but a big range of cold in which you can generate adrenaline without harming your tissue. Whereas with heat, you get into a very hot environment or very low oxygen environment, you'll also get a lot of adrenaline, but you can also suffocate and burn yourself. So this is why cold is used in Navy SEAL screening and training. And this is why I think so many people really like the ice bath and cold showers. It has a bunch of other positive effects, but it is a great trigger for adrenaline.
If I could give you one good piece of advice, the biggest mistake that kids make in high school is they're worried about high school social dynamics. And so they don't go do things that they want to do or learn about because it might not be cool or their friend group might not be about it. So if you're into theater or if you're into science or robotics or comedy, or I have no idea what's running through your mind that catches your eye on YouTube or TikTok or things of that nature, but the way you're gonna find what you should do in life in the best way, the way the people that are the happiest at what they do, is you gotta go try it. You like comedy? Go try to do a stand-up set somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, go try stuff, because you don't know if you love it until you try it.
I think it's believing in the 85-year-old version of you, who's exactly who you want to be, and then ruthlessly looking at the discrepancy between the pittance of a human that you are now compared to that man or that woman, and then step by step breaking down the many differences and starting on the first one and pulling the thread. Never really asked anyone for money. And all of a sudden I had to come up with $5,000 in a month. And then at the end of the month, I watched it go to zero. And then I was like, I have to do it again. And that was when the reality of the situation of there was no escape. There was no one who was going to come to save me. And I couldn't blame my dad. I couldn't blame my mom. I was the one who had chosen this life. But the alternative was that I had to go back to my father, a failure, and have him look me in the eyes and say, I told you. And come here, don't worry about it. I told you this gym stuff, this fitness stuff, this starting your own business, it's for later. It's fine. Just go back. Hey, you've got this great degree. Just go to the business school to do the thing. And I knew exactly what had happened. But what would have happened after that is that for the rest of my life, he would have had absolute authority over everything that I did. And that felt like death. And so that was what I ran away from when I was in that moment. Whenever I felt like my back was against the wall and I didn't know what to do, and it felt like the Instagram reels of the motivation weren't going to get me through what I was going through, because no one cared that I was sleeping alone. I let them know I'm sleeping on the floor. And a month later, when you're still sleeping on the floor, everyone's like, don't care. Great. You're pursuing your dream, right?
If I'm this happy, if I lack the anxiety that I see in 99.9% of people, I have a sense of responsibility to over-communicate in case a sentence on a podcast triggers something for someone and starts their journey to be happier. I don't know something more noble a human can do than be on a quest to leave collateral, droppings along the way that may help and will help others.
For me, I was more miserable trying to make everyone else happy than I am now with everyone else unhappy with me. And so I think from the social group I had before I quit my job, if we're going all the way ground zero to today, I talked to no one from that time in my life compared to today. And I was absolutely miserable and unhappy and unfulfilled. And I would say that the majority of those people probably don't like me today because I changed. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. He thinks he's so fancy now, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I'm just okay with that. And so I think coming to terms with the idea that I could be absolutely rejected by everyone I know, but like me, I was more okay with that because the alternative was I didn't want to live anymore.
Both your parents and this incredible institution will be okay whether you get straight A's or B's or C's or that. I think the bigger question is, do you know yourself? I think there's unlimited people who are successful and happy that got straight A's, and there's unlimited people who are successful and happy who got D's and F's. The question is, who are you? Which version of the game are you? What do you like? Who do you want to be? And I think that's what you need to focus on.
Scientific study, anyone can do this. you can decrease your iPhone usage by simply going to grayscale. Like across age groups, if you switch your colors on your screen to grayscale, you will use it 30% less than you normally would. It's like great for most people, that's like an hour plus a day. The lack of certainty is what actually makes it worth it. And so here's my point. Let's consider the alternative, which is that you are on the path and you are guaranteed to know that you're going to get the outcome. All of the mystery is gone. There is no excitement, which is why they said, in the ancient Greeks would say that the gods always envied the mortals because their life was so ephemeral. They had so much chance that could happen to them, right? Where the gods always knew that they weren't going to die and it was completely guaranteed. And so what we do is we basically have this wish that if it actually came true, we would hate it even more than our current circumstance. If you knew that you were going to succeed, it wouldn't be worth doing to begin with. The fact that you are uncertain when you start is what makes it worthwhile. And the fallacy of being in the pursuit is the worry or the concern that it won't amount to anything, because who you are becoming is the thing that you are amounting to in real time every day.
We have to change the definition of success. We have to. It cannot be the flex. We cannot put expensive watches and cars and bank accounts on a pedestal. We must get away from that. But that doesn't mean we demonize it either. We have to make it about the process of the game. We've got to find our way, because right now we're over here and we've got to find this.
It's like living for the future version of yourself and letting that person be your ultimate judge and no one else's voice. And I think that obviously it takes practice. We're social creatures. We learn how to behave from other people and their judgment of our behavior when we're kids. And then we have to unlearn it as we're adults, because we find out that the people who are giving us feedback actually have no idea what they're doing.
We either unconsciously or sometimes consciously adopt the patterns of our parents. Sometimes more from one parent, sometimes more from the other, single parent home, it varies, right? But we develop these patterns of thinking certain things, valuing certain things, believing certain things. And then adolescence and the teen years and the young adult years hit, and something really interesting happens. We either internalize those and carry them forward, or in some cases, we do not something different, but we consciously do the exact opposite. And it's at that point in our developmental trajectory that we really start to elaborate and change our sense of self.
The path of personal development is befriending uncertainty. And so I obviously sit from the entrepreneurial perspective, but almost all decisions that you make in the beginning, you have incomplete data and you have to make decisions anyways. And so it's growing comfortable with taking your best bad guess and being directionally correct rather than searching for a perfect answer, because a perfect answer assumes perfect information, which you can only have after you begin. And so in some ways, making a decision is the perfect answer so that you can get the information
feedback
to then improve the quality of the decision later. And I think that one loop is what a lot of people miss out on, is that they obsess for years sometimes on the perfect pick, the perfect business, the perfect job, the perfect mate, when most of the times beginning each step illuminates the next step, which means the information, the feedback that you get from walking gives you more about where to walk than trying to sit at the beginning in the darkness and pick a direction.
And people are realizing, if I have this dream, if I have this goal, how bad do I want it? And if they really want it, and we've all done this, you sit down and you say, what would it be like to be super healthy, super wealthy, super in love, super mystical, transcendental, whatever it is. Like, you ask that question and your brain gets really creative. It starts combining circuits in new ways, and you start getting this vision of the future, this possibility that you actually put yourself in this future reality. It becomes so real that you start to feel the emotion as if you were actually there. And so that moment when you come out of your resting state, the stronger the emotion you feel when you hold that vision, the more you'll remember that vision. That's creating a memory. So the person comes out of their resting state and they make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that causes their body to respond to their mind.
Things from one central behavior, which is just fucking go to bed on time. And so if you want the action for this, you set your alarm for when you go to bed, not for when you wake up. If you set your alarm for when you go to bed, you will always be able to wake up naturally at whatever time you wake up. And it's very difficult to oversleep when you go to bed at 9 because you can get 8 hours of sleep and still be up by 5. And that's why I think that most things are actually significantly easier than people think they are. They just don't know how to try hard. Because the harder that you try, the easier it gets. And so it's like, if you can just learn to love what trying hard feels like, then all of a sudden it becomes unreasonable that you can't win.
I think the key to happiness is being content while being ambitious. And I think being content comes from gratitude. I'm so grateful for what I have, and I've always been that way, that all this special stuff that has been happening doesn't mean enough to me. This is not where my self-worth comes in. The Gary Vee crap and the claps and the follower, like, it's incredible, but it's not what I aspire to. It's not how I see my value. And I think the only way to be happy is to have a quiet mind. And I think a quiet mind comes from a balance of very deep humility and true perspective of understanding that you just genuinely understand that you don't mean shit in the scheme of things, but you aspire in your behavior to mean something.
Sadness is a perceived lack of options. It's why it feels like hopelessness, because you don't know what to do. You don't know what options are available. You see none, which is why it feels like there's no way out. Anxiety is many options but no priorities, which is why you feel scattered but you can't decide. They feel very different, but fundamentally, those are the difference in the conditions that make people feel like they're anxious or they feel like they're sad. And so when we're working through what you were just talking about with, okay, I want to be gym guy and I also want to be work guy, we have many options but a lack of priorities. And so we have anxiety over the fact that we're not making progress on any of them because we have not been able to say, this comes first.
I think what also made me was standing on a lemonade stand for months in my life, 2 days here, 3 days here, 5 days here, months of my life from 6 to 13, and watching 99.9% of the cars drive by my stand and not react to my great steins and not stop and buy my lemonade. I think what made me was 100 out of 105 people said no to shoveling snow. What made me was I had a baseball card table and I watched 100 people walk by and not want to buy anything from me, even though I had good stickers and good cards, and won. The market made me. All those no's became enjoyable.
Yeah, people don't know how to manage their emotions. I think the more, at least for me, the more I've tried to create space between how I feel and what I do, the more consistent my outcomes have been.
The world is going to be very good at telling you what you're not good at. What you need to focus on is realizing that you're good at plenty of things. You might have not found them all, but that you're a good person and you have good intent, and you really have to work on that. And I promise you, especially at the age you're at right now, pay attention to the friends that you hang out with. You need to figure out if they make you feel good. And if they don't, even if they're the most popular or the coolest, you need to cut them out.
If you're going through that right now, and I promise you, every single person who wants to do something with their life and has done something with their life has gone through the exact chapter that you're going through. And it's the lonely chapter. It's the chapter where you don't fit in with your own friends, but you don't have the outcomes yet to fit into a new group of friends. And you're doing this thing, you're consuming content on the internet, you're doing these free tutorials online to try and figure out how to set up a podcast and where do I host this thing? And then you're going through this and you're like, is this even worth it? Because you have no signs of success, right? But if there's anything that you can take away from what we're saying right now, is that the sign of success is the hate that you get along the way. And what you can't do is bend the knee to their hate and fit back into the conformity because it's comfortable and it's warm. Because like in the Matrix, when Trinity opens the door, when Neo's about to go take the red pill and he wants to get out of the car, she says, Neo, you've been down that road and you know exactly where it leads. And I know that's not where you want to be. And then he closes the door. Like right now, this moment that you're going through is Trinity opening the door and being like, you could go back, but then you'd have to remember exactly what the reason was that you decided not to go out to begin with, just because you listen to this podcast and you consume this content, you're like, I can fucking do more than this.
It's so simple, and yet I do think it's the most fundamental thing to understanding oneself is that it's all internal. right? If you finish a marathon in first place, no one comes along and drips dopamine in your ear. You self-generate that. It's all internal. It's all about your internal representation. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't good and bad events in life, but the fact of the matter is that if you set the next milestone as just outside the distance of what you're comfortable with, and you make it there, if you allow yourself a moment to register that win, you get energy to then set the next milestone and achieve it. That energy is dopamine converted into epinephrine, into adrenaline.
If you think back to college, when you were a freshman, you think, wow, this is so hard or whatever. And then by the time you're a senior, you're like, man, these kids are so soft. And so we remember things as harder than they were. But I also think that there is a thread of reality, which is that the younger generation is softer. And I think we are softer than the generation above us. When I think about the guys who were storming Normandy, and I think about the people who would be attempting to do that now, as a class, I think that we are softer. And so the thing is that if you can barely decide to take any action at all and peel your eyes away from your phone for just a moment, it's so much easier to beat everyone else because most people are overweight, they're distracted, they're poor, they have so few skills because it has never been easier to start a business, to make money, to get in shape. It's just also never been easier to do nothing.
I think we need more accountability, and I'm incredibly accountable. If I am unhappy, I don't think it's the president's fault. I don't think it's my parents' fault. I don't think it's anyone's fault but myself, and I'm in control, and so I act on it. That's the insight there.
I'd say one of the strongest mental frames that has gotten me through my hardest times is thinking this will be the story that I will one day tell. And that means the harder it is, the bigger the dragon, the more epic the story, and by consequence, the more epic the hero. And if you think about the difference between winners and losers, winners define themselves by what they made happen, and losers define themselves by what happened to them. And the difficult part of the lonely chapter is that the Rocky cutscene lasts 90 seconds in the movie and lasts 5 years in reality. If I have sadness, great, what do I not know? Okay, now I have to go figure that out. Great, I have something to do. And so that I think these are like mental models around using emotions to fuel the behaviors that you want.
Here's my punchline. I think people spend way too much time on negativity. I don't know what to really tell you. And so there's a lot of people unhappy because you consume unhappy things, the news, and you hang around unhappy people, relatives that are unhappy. And I don't think you should cut out and no longer talk to your homies. I hate when people hear it and think they've outgrown their friends and they want to get bougie. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying pay attention to everybody you spend time with and what you consume. And that whole saying when we were growing up, you become who you hang out with, it's just super real. Whatever you're consuming is what's dictating your point of view. And it's different than it was when I was best friends with them when I was 10 or 20. And so I would tell you, you don't have to cut people out of your life, but you need to communicate to them why you're limiting your time with them. And by the way, that may inspire them to look inside and pay attention to what they're thinking about.
There's a stimulus and there's a response. What happens in the box inside of your head does not matter. If you respond a certain way, you have learned. And if you continue to see the same stimulus and you don't respond the way you want to, you have not learned. So you need to learn. He was like, the only thing that you can do is win so big that all of them constantly compare themselves to you, and then you'll forget they exist. And that's when he said, success is the only revenge. He's like, it's not the best revenge. He's like, it's the only one. There's no other revenge because everything else is petty. Everything else does show that you were thinking about these people all day long, which means they win by default.
I think that there's a delicate balance between intention, and that's getting clear on what you want, and surrender, which means trusting in the outcome. And if you overintend, you're working really hard and you're trying really hard. And if you over-surrender, you're lazy and lethargic and you're not doing anything, right? So it's kind of a razor's edge when you talk about hard work, because for me, and It really is about building a model of understanding and then being able to immerse myself in the experience to prove to myself that it actually could be the truth. So the hard work is just good, clean effort and getting so lost in the act of what you're doing that the act actually becomes the experience.
There are more people that I have met in my life who are dissatisfied by their live it up 20s than dissatisfied by their work it up 20s. Because most of the time in your 20s, you have no idea what you want. But knowing what you need to do to work and move ahead is fairly straightforward. And so you can take the known and make progress on the one that you have high confidence that you can make progress on. And then along the way, gain perspective on what are the things that are actually important to you in your life. And you may find out often that there are far fewer of those things than you really originally thought, because what you thought live 'em up in your 20s was actually your mom and your two homies who are both mediocre, and you don't care about their opinion now when you're 30 anyways. But what a waste of a life it would have been to, quote, live up your mom's dream or your friend's dreams to then only get to your 30s and realize you didn't live it up and you also didn't work it up. And now you have neither.